We recommend that people start small, maybe issue a 5 to 10% SNS allocation. The last thing you want is to, issue 50% of your SNS value at, a 10 million valuation just to watch your alpha token triple in price over the next 6 months. And then you feel like, you kind of gave up too much too early. It's a permissioned launch pad. So it's not like anyone could just show up and launch on TAOFU. We've had some people reach out to us that quite frankly are not the best fit for this, or maybe not in it for the right reasons. We don't want people that are just here to raise some money off the back of their alpha and then take that money and not put that value back into the subnet. That doesn't help our reputation.
Following analysis of Bittensor on Twitter. So trying to check out like who are the people that I know that are following this on the sidelines. What do they think about it? And through that, I actually found out that there was like a lot of really interesting open source AI people looking into this. There was a lot of like big ETH maxis also looking into this. Well, I can imagine that there's like going to be future Web2 moguls that are going to be moving into Bittensor to subsidize part of the cost that they have. Whether you look at companies like Suno or like the song generation thing, or you look at companies like Midjourney, basically moving the Bittensor to incentivize the competition amongst miners and basically just earn more money by reducing costs. I think that's amazing.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Matt and Mitch from TAOFU and TPN to unpack their exciting work in the Bittensor ecosystem. They'll take us through Subnet 65, their decentralized VPN focused on privacy and open access, and TAOFU, a platform revolutionizing subnet funding with SNS tokens, helping subnet owners raise capital without sacrificing alpha tokens. We'll explore their freemium VPN app and how Bittensor's EVM layer unlocks cross-chain potential in crypto index funds. Now, back to Matt and Mitch with the 43rd Ventura Labs podcast. All right, Mitch, Matt, good to get you guys on the show today. How you guys doing?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Very good. Thanks for having us, indeed.
Absolutely. So let's start with, if you guys could just introduce yourselves, what you do at TAOFU and TPN, and how you guys met.
How we met. Yeah, we've actually met during Denver, ETH Denver. There was like a bunch of side events where we saw Matt hanging around. He was really excited about Bittensor, and after a couple of nights, we realized like, why is he not on our team? So yeah, since then we've basically been exploring a potential partnership, and Matt recently joined us and Masa, and we're really happy to work together.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. Previously, I was at a company called Impstones, which is a pretty major blockchain infrastructure provider. Doesn't really do much on the Bittensor side. Now they're starting to get into it because I got really interested into it. About 6, 7 months ago, one of my clients at Impstones, which is Masa, has Subnet 42 and Subnet 59. We were supporting them on their testnet. They, told me they were launching a subnet, wanted us to run miners and a validator. I was like, what's a subnet? So I went all the way down the Bittensor rabbit hole. The more I learned, the more excited I got. Didn't take me long to realize after a few months that I wanted to be all in on Bittensor. So we started looking for new roles in the space. I talked with the Masa team naturally, since they, already had a working relationship with them. And then at ETH Denver, I met the TAOFU guys, which were just awesome group of guys, had really cool merch, just got along really well with the guys, was really interested and excited by, what they were building. And then, at the end of the week, they gave me a verbal offer. That prompted me to go back to the Masa team, who I had already been speaking with, when Calanthia, the CEO there, gave me the idea of, well, have you thought about working for both teams? And I said, well, no, I hadn't really thought about that. Is that something you'd be open to? And she said, yeah, I think it'd be great. There's a lot of synergies in the Bittensor ecosystem. We're not really competitors at all. We'll introduce you to people that'll help out the TAOFU team. They'll introduce you to people that'll help out for us. I think it could be a really good synergistic relationship. And so I went back to Mitch and Mikkel. I said, what do you guys think of this? And they said it sounds great. So that has been since April 1. I started doing growth strategy in the Bittensor ecosystem for both Masa and TAOFU, and It's been fun. This has been the most excited I've ever been to wake up and go to work in my life. Just loving BitTensor, loving working with both teams, learning a ton from each, and this is a career that I'm now like fully excited about, which is a good feeling.
Good move.
There you go. And then, Mitch, you are the co-founder of TPN Subnet 65 and TAOFU,
Yep.
and Mikkel is your other co-founder. What does the team look like for both the subnet and I guess the protocol that is TAOFU? I don't
Yeah.
know how to describe it better than that.
Yeah. So we basically have one full-time team, of course. So our team consists of 9 people. We've basically spread our resources to work 50-50 on both the subnet and on the protocol itself. And then TaoFu itself is like a subnet tokenization platform and fundraising. And the TPN is like an open way of providing VPN connections to any developer or any user through a subnet. So basically subsidizing all the costs and allowing anyone to build apps on top of it. So that's like how we spread our resources so far.
And so we heard how Matt got into BitTensor. Mitch, how did you get into BitTensor?
So for me, it was actually, I was in a WhatsApp group in Europe. Everybody uses WhatsApp. And there was this guy that kept on dropping like bombs on DAO in the chat, like end of 2022. And at some point I was like, okay, I'll look into it. I saw like the white paper back then. And I was like, oh, wow, this is different. It was a little bit complicated to understand. And then I just started digging like into the Discord. I did like a following analysis of Bittensor on Twitter. So trying to check out like who are the people that I know that are following this on the sidelines. What do they think about it? And through that, I actually found out that there was like a lot of really interesting open source AI people looking into this. There was a lot of like big ETH maxis also looking into this. And then I basically contacted Mikkel like, hey, this actually might be something, as well as like a bunch of other friends told them to like, I would buy some Tao just to be sure. And then, yeah, Tao started exploding. We had the idea to start like a business on top of it. And then everything just, came together. So we were there like pre-subnets, pre-DTAO, when it was still like in its infancy.
So you've been here for a while if you're here pre-subnet.
That's
Subnet 65 was the first subnet launched post-DTAO. And I think in the history of TAO so far, it's the cheapest subnet also to be registered. I think you got for like 38 TAO.
yeah. Yeah, we basically we weren't ready to fully deploy the subnet as in like the tech behind it, but we made like a promise internally, like if we see the price drop below 40 Tau, we have to buy it, or 50 Tau. And then it was at 38 Tau, and we just looked at each other at the office and we're like, oh shit, now we got to buy it.
Yeah.
And that's also like why we had to split like the resources of our team to start working on the subnet. It turned out to be like an extremely good buy, a bargain.
And Subnet 65 is a decentralized VPN. What sparked this idea? Why did you guys decide to pursue this idea?
Well, one of our guys, like the CTO, he's basically ran 2 VPN companies in the past, both which actually got acquired. So he's always been really interested about this. And we think like in the world of AI, it actually really makes sense to sometimes bypass geo restrictions that you naturally run into when you're building in AI. Whether you're prompting like an LLM from Iran or Russia, the output is going to be like extremely different to someone doing it here in Amsterdam or from the US. So it makes like a ton of sense to do it for that, or for data scraping, or for any other purpose. So he's always built like open source code. So he really wants other people to leverage what we're building so that they can be sort of enabled in whatever they're doing. So that's sort of like how this came to be, and why we think this approach is the best way to go forward.
And when did you said you split your time 50-50 TAOFU and the subnet? When did the idea spark for TAOFU and tokenizing the subnet owner keys?
Yeah, so like initially with TAOFU, what we wanted to do a long time ago, actually, like in 2023, we wanted to build like an institutional liquid staking protocol for Tau, because we saw there was like institutional interest. But there wasn't really a safe way to have like really large bags of like staked Tau that you could then leverage in DeFi. And there was one regulated custodian in the entire market that happened to be from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And we were looking to work together to basically facilitate this for these institutional players in crypto. And then the MiCAR regulation came out, which is like kind of, it made it really hard for us to do this in a legal way. So everything that we had built kind of got destroyed by that. And the custodian that we were looking to work with basically pulled out of the deal. And that made us go back to the drawing board, like at the time. So we had to sort of pivot, and we figured out, okay, why not build the whole custodial solution ourselves and then make it like institutionally friendly. And then by the time we did, DTAO got announced, which really like changed up the game for like all the subnets, but also like for the liquid stake Tau. And we weren't sure if like sort of the variable APY that you would get on your stake Tau would be interesting for institutional players. So we decided to basically, quit working on that. And then during a lunch that we had like in Amsterdam, we were thinking about, okay, Pump Fun has been really great. Echo has been really interesting or better, so to say. Like Pump Fun was an experiment, but you saw that people could launch projects through their platform. And then Echo kind of democratizes like the VC funding that you see for like early stage projects. And we wanted to do the same for subnets, but the interesting like dynamics around the Tau and the subnets themselves. Right now, most of the funding is kind of gate capped between like insiders or people with access, and it's not really open to anybody else. So yeah, we didn't want to do like the pointless token launching, which you have on Pump Up Fund, but we wanted to have them like some sort of utility to make it meaningful. And yeah, that's how the idea came up. So what if we just tokenize like the subnet owner part, raise funds for that, and yeah, make it meaningful.
And Matt, you are just at TAOFU, correct? You're not involved with the subnet.
I mean, TAOFU is kind of the entity that works on both the subnet and the launchpad. So, I consider myself being, involved with both. I would say that my focus has definitely more so been on the launchpad and working with subnets to, partner and have them launch with the launchpad and SNS and tokenize. I think what's really interesting is, Mitch mentioned like the transition from pre-DTAO to post-DTAO. And I think that is really kind of what triggered the light bulb in their head as to like what the problem was, and the solution that TaoFu presents is really novel. If you look at pre-DTAO, subnet owners were making a lot of money off Tau emissions. And that was a really great bootstrapping mechanism. It was a great way to fund growth. It was a great way to pay your operations, to pay your salaries, to, bootstrap without needing to raise money. And that was really powerful for a long time for a lot of these early subnets. And when DTAO came along, the entire economics of the incentive mechanism completely changed. And so now what was previously, where the validators were kind of kingmakers in assigning emissions to the subnets, now it was a completely free open market system where the amount of emissions that you received as a subnet was completely dependent on the price of your alpha token. And with that, it became really, really critical to manage the sell pressure on your alpha token from the emissions and build up your liquidity pool. And so as a result, these subnet owners were still receiving these emissions via the form of their own subnet alpha token, but they really were in a place where they couldn't sell them. Because if you as a subnet owner began selling your alpha token emissions for Tau to pay your bills, to pay your people, to use as bootstrapping mechanism like you did before, that would create almost some sort of like a death spiral where it would lower the alpha token price, which lowers your emissions, which lowers the incentive for miners to participate on your network. and then you can kind of create this downward spiral. And so we've resulted in this post-DTAL world where subnet owners, in large part, really feel like they can't sell their alpha emissions, and most of them haven't sold any of their alpha emissions. But on the flip side, they still need to raise capital. They still need to pay their bills. They still need to, monetize their service, and that takes time, right? So I think one good thing is that it's really pushed subnet owners to ship products and to think about the business sense of their subnet and monetize their service. But that takes time, and not everyone's in a place where they're able to develop customers, launch a product, generate revenue, find product market fit. All those things take time. And TAOFU presents a really novel way to tap in to the liquidity that you have of your alpha emissions without actually selling your alpha emissions. So what TAOFU really is, and what SNS or subnet seeds are, is a liquid proxy or representation of your alpha as a subnet owner. So we tokenize your 18% owner share of the alpha out emissions, and you sell those to your community as a liquid representation of your alpha, but they also have additional utility that alpha tokens currently don't have. And part of that is a function of being built on the Bittensor EVM, which introduces a lot of interesting new things that we can do that native alpha tokens can't. Such as more cross-chain compatibility, such as other DeFi things that you can build off of SNS tokens, like index funds, leverage trading, lending type options. You also get a variety of perks as an SNS holder that alpha tokens just can't have or don't have. You have governance rights over those alpha emissions. You have, which is a huge selling point or value proposition for validators. You have the ability to vote and delegate those alpha emissions to a validator of your choosing. You also can have subnet specific perks where you get discounted or free access to that subnet service, um, and a potential claim to the staking rewards generated by those alpha emissions as well. And I think there's a lot more flexibility and a lot more value that can be created by the subnet owner in the form of SNS, which makes it a really, really interesting, kind of liquid proxy for that alpha. And at the same time, offers an opportunity for these subnet owners to generate funding while keeping their alpha emissions intact, keeping a healthy liquidity pool, and maintaining a high emission rate.
Would you say the problem that you guys are solving is just enabling subnet owners to not sell their alpha token? Because some people would argue that that's the whole point of a subnet, is for
Yeah.
the subnet owner to be funded by Bittensor itself.
Well, I would say the sort of the alpha tokens, they're all also like a technical component to DTAO, where the more alpha tokens that you possess, the more control that you have over your subnet, and also directing emissions. So if you're selling your alpha tokens to cover for expenses, it basically kind of hurts your own liquidity. It hurts your future emissions. And like Matt said, like if the SNS are like a direct representation of this alpha, you basically have a part of that happening outside of your DTAO pools. So that could also create like really interesting scenarios where, imagine if the alpha tokens are really like going up in value and the FTV is growing, then the representation of the SNS could actually lag behind that, which is interesting. And what's also interesting, what Matt said, like about the Bittensor EVM and the composability that it brings, because the Bittensor EVM is not really like an ETH L2, but more as it's like standalone EVM compatibility layer on Substrate, which Bittensor is built on. You can actually call like native Bittensor functions from smart contracts on the EVM, Bittensor EVM, and that's not something that you can do like on many other ecosystems, because like the functions of Substrate itself are really different, and that can create like really interesting future sort of utility, although like it's not fully flushed out yet.
What are some examples of this future utility that could be done with this EVM layer?
Matt, you want to take this?
Yeah. So, I touched on a few. I think cross-chain composability is something that is a lot more better suited for SNS being on the Bittensor EVM. We saw big announcements from Layer Zero earlier this week, and what they're enabling with cross-chain compatibility for Bittensor. But that is specifically for the Bittensor EVM, not for, the native substrate layer. There's a lot more DeFi products that can be built on top of the Bittensor EVM, such as lending protocols based on your SNS. That can generate additional yield opportunities. Index funds, we've been talking with Mentap Minds as a potential partner to do something similar with what they're doing with alpha tokens already, and the kind of packaged index funds. And there's also subnet specific utility that can be introduced by the subnet owners, as I mentioned, where they can give SNS holders unique rights that alpha tokens holders may not have, or may not have the same ability to provide, being on the native substrate versus the Bittensor EVM, such as exclusive access to products, or early access as an SNS holder to new releases. Potential ability to vote on governance proposals of the future direction of your subnet. And we almost view the SNS holders as more of like more invested, more active stakeholders in the subnet, whereas alpha token holders are still invested, but have a lot less utility beyond just number go up, right?
Since SNS holders have greater utility, how do you value holding SNS versus just holding the alpha? Because I would assume the alpha token would be a more liquid market since it's bigger.
Yeah. The alpha token would be more liquid, but also more volatile, because it's really inflationary. There's a lot of other like different parties involved with it. So you have the miners, of course, that need to cover cost. So they have to sell. So you have more selling pressure. And then the biggest difference with like the SNS is that the supply is fixed. So it's going to be fixed at like 21 million tokens always. So that's like a big differentiator, I would say. And then, yeah, how do you value it? That's really hard. I think it really depends on like each subnet, and like the sort of the layer that they build on top of it, or the way that their team is able to execute and really deliver value as like a subnet team. I think at some point we're going to basically move towards teams that are going to be subsidizing costs by running subnets, and basically by incentivizing what they need to have done through miners, they can actually cut costs pretty significantly, and that would then in turn, of course, help in determining the value of a subnet. But basically, yeah, it's a hard answer because it really depends per subnet.
And just like anything else, ultimately the market will dictate that, and will make that decision. You are right that the alpha tokens are naturally going to have more liquidity by nature and by the function of the emission schedule. With that said, SNS tokens will have a secondary market of liquidity provision on day one. That's structured into the way that we build the sales, where depending on the size, 10 to 20% of the funds raised, matched by a corresponding SNS token amount, will be provisioned on day one. So there will be a secondary market right away. But as Mitch mentioned, there's very likely going to be a lot less volatility as well, because you don't have the same market participants, you don't have the same inflation levels, you don't have constant sell pressure from people like miners, and other potential stakers, or the weight copier validators of the world. So we look at it as potentially being a much more stable way to invest in subnets, while they also, still carry that, real direct representation to the underlying alpha.
You guys recently had a test sale, so you haven't had any sales for actual subnets yet. Can you walk me through what that process will look like if someone wants to participate?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, Grant, appreciate your participation in our test sale last week. We did a kind of private test sale where we invited, a curated whitelist of close partners and friends at TAOFU to test out the platform. Our first SNS sale will be going live next week. Tentatively scheduling the date, we're looking at sometime end of next week for Subnet 65 TPN. The exact sale details will be released soon, probably towards the end of this week. But for new subnets that are interested, the first step would be reaching out to us, myself or Mitch, would probably be your best points of contact to begin the process. And then it's really deciding, and again, we'll hold your hand. We work through this. It's a permissioned launch pad, so it's not like anyone could just show up and launch on TAOFU. We've had some people reach out to us that, quite frankly, are not the best fit for this, or maybe not in it for the right reasons. We don't want people that are just here to raise some money off the back of their alpha and then take that money and not put that value back into the subnet. That doesn't help our reputation. It doesn't help SNS holders. And so we're being very careful about curating the list of subnets that we partner with, especially early on, to prove the concept and show that it's, can be successful. We really want those SNS holders to feel good about their investment and to drive that value and the funds being raised to build up the subnet and drive value back to that subnet. So for subnet owners that are interested, you can reach out to myself or Mitch on Telegram or Twitter. You can DM us our TAOFU account on Twitter, and they'll put you in touch with us. But the next steps are walking through what your valuation should and will be. We've had some people that get a little overambitious with what their valuation might be worth, and sometimes we have to tone that back a little bit. We recommend that people start small, maybe issue a 5 to 10% SNS allocation. The last thing you want is to issue 50% of your SNS value at a 10 million valuation just to watch your alpha token triple in price over the next 6 months, and then you feel like you kind of gave up too much too early. So we recommend people to start small. It's then about setting a soft cap and a hard cap. The soft cap is the minimum amount of TAO you need to raise for the sale to be successful. If this amount of TAO is not raised, then the sale does not proceed, and those investors are refunded their TAO. The hard cap would be the max. That's how much you're looking to raise. We look at setting up a timeline of when you want to go and make this sale live. We work through a go-to-market strategy with you guys about curating who are your targets. Are you more focused on validators? Are you focused on, do you want to get VCs involved in your raise? The really good thing about being an SNS sale as a subnet owner is you're really in control and you dictate the terms of your sale. Going the traditional VC route, you have a lot less control. They're much more likely to dictate the terms. You're more likely to give up control of a meaningful portion of your alpha, which can be concerning for subnet owners. But yeah, those are kind of the steps. We walk through the valuation. We talk about a go-to-market strategy. We think about what the soft cap, hard cap, how much you're trying to raise, what sort of timeline looks like, and then we set the sale. You can pick a curator as well. That's an optional feature that we offer for subnet owners. That you can think of a curator almost like as an investment bank, like a partner to help you drum up interest and drum up demand for your sale, who you can pay a fee. That's an optional thing. Some subnet owners may see a lot of value in that. Some subnet owners might say, my sale's going to sell out, no problem. I don't need anybody to help me get up interest, and that's also fine. We offer that as an option, but yeah, that's kind of like the steps, sort of how it works.
And then if you could walk me through what the buy side of this looks like. If someone wants to come in and participate in a subnet sale, they get some bridged TAL tokens, go to your Launchpad site, buy it, and then the SNS token is in their MetaMask account?
Yeah, so everything's on the Bittensor EVM, right? So you need to have an Ethereum wallet to participate in this.
Talisman.
If you everything is built on Everything's built in. Yeah, Talisman is a great wallet to use for that. So we have everything built into our Launchpad. A lot of people are going to show up with native TAO and want to participate. We have a bridge built into our platform. You can bridge your substrate TAO to Bittensor EVM TAO, and then you'll be able to use that to purchase the SNS. In advance of the sale, we have a registration period. So you need to join the whitelist. This is for legal reasons to make sure that we're not letting, blacklisted wallets or anything like that participate in the sale. It's also, for the protection of the subnet owners as well. And then once the sale goes live, you'll have a window to participate in the sale. The window is, can be a set time frame, but it's also once the sale runs out, it runs out. So, it could go for 3 days, but if it sells out on the first day, it sells out on the first day. And then when the sale completes, you come back to claim your SNS. So one thing that, some people get confused by is like, hey, I participated in the sale, I bought my SNS, why isn't the SNS in my wallet? The SNS doesn't get distributed until the sale concludes. And that's for a couple reasons. One, to make sure the soft cap is hit. But secondly, it brings people back to the page to claim their SNS, so then they can then interact with their SNS, participate in the governance rights that they've earned, and start to use some of the utility that they have.
And Mitch, Subnet 65, your Subnet TPN, is going to be the first one to use TAOFU and sell the SNS tokens.
Yes, sir.
What is the evaluation that you guys are doing? What's your soft cap? What's your hard cap? How'd you reach those numbers? And you said it is probably happening at the end of next week.
Yeah, I think the exact valuation, it might like change a little. We want to make it fair. So I think it's going to be kind of discounted to what it potentially should be. But for us, like the most important part is to have a successful launch. And we also co-incubated this together with Contango Labs. So they also have a say in this, as we're both basically selling like part of the alpha tokens that are committed to us. So it's not that we need the money per se, but it's more as like a public proof of concept, getting people familiar with the process, and also the feedback that we're going to get like from this first launch is going to be really important for us. So I can't really give like an exact answer on the valuation yet.
Okay. And then TPN is a decentralized VPN network.
Yeah.
What are the miner validator dynamics in this subnet?
So the miners basically, they arrange the VPN connections that are requested, that are routed through the validators. And say somebody wants to lease like an IP address for 24 hours from Russia, and a miner can produce that, then the miner would be rewarded for doing so. So it's really simple. And then I think the most interesting part about what we've built is that it's like an open network, so that anybody can build on top of this or leverage the API. So we want like other subnets or other miners to basically be able to leverage the API in whatever they're doing. And that's going to be super interesting for us. And then from like a business perspective, we're also going to build our own app on top of it, which is like a flagship VPN app. And that's going to be really consumer focused. So we can basically scale that through traditional Web2 like marketing. And then it's going to be in like a freemium model and a paid monthly subscription model. And then we can use part of the revenue from that to basically buy back more alpha or buy back some of the SNS, of course.
And this app, would it look like an Express VPN type of?
Yeah, I would say like we'll completely abstract away Bittensor. So it's going to be like a regular VPN app that anybody can use or download or leverage. It's going to be cheaper because we don't have like the traditional infra costs that would come with an app like this. And because it's a freemium model, you're basically providing your user data, not as in like your personal data, but more like anonymized and based on like groups of people using the VPN app. And then we could sell that data to bigger parties.
And what would you consider the innovation that miners are doing? What do they compete on? The number of IP addresses they can provide, the speed at which they can provide it? What do they compete on?
Well, right now, like we cannot predict where miners are going to be spinning up locations. So what's really interesting, we've already had like 80 different locations that are being offered through miners. And because it's so decentralized and so distributed, the incentives as the subnet, of course, grows, they become more interesting for people to compete, which is like part of what makes Bittensor so great. So I would say like the miner part on how they're able to arrange like these locations and provide like IP leases to people all around the world, I think that's really interesting because we don't have to do it. They're basically doing it. And then once we have like the subnets that Gans alluded to, I think we can build like some really cool stuff on top of this, where we could basically offer potentially millions of connections at some point in time, which is like, of course, what we want to grow towards.
And from an incentive mechanism perspective, what are the miners being scored on by the validators? What are they rewarded for?
That's actually a really good question that I don't know the full answer to.
Believe it's partially based on, to my understanding and talking with mentor or CTO who's building this, it's partially scored on like the number of IP addresses and connections that you're providing, but also the locations based on demand and kind of obscurity. Like if there's already 100 locations or IP addresses being provided, let's say in Amsterdam, for example, but we have high demand for IP addresses that are, more obscure or maybe somewhere in Asia or Africa, providing those more, difficult to find or rare IPs will get scored higher as well based on, their obscurity, so to speak. So I think it's a combination of, the number of IPs that you're providing as well as the uniqueness of the geolocation based on like the demand.
And what would you guys consider as the total addressable market for this? What is the market share you're trying to grab? Is it just take away traffic from ExpressVPN and companies of that kind?
No, I would just say for us, it could be amazing to build a VPN app on top of it that's cheaper than most of the competitors, and then just scale it and add value to Bittensor as a whole, and integrate it like within the wider ecosystem so that they can also leverage the API.
Did you guys pursue this idea because you think VPNs will become more essential in the world going forward and everything will become more firewalled and protected?
I would say that this is like an amazing question for Mentor, of course, because he's already built two companies like this and sold them. But he's really focused on like open infrastructure for anything that he builds. And he also is really fond on like privacy for anybody on the internet. And I think what without being able to offer that in like a permissionless way where any miner can basically provide the infra and provide access to other people online, I think that's a really strong point. But
I,
to say that we're going to scale past like the giants at this point, it's a little bit premature. But I think the intentions are definitely there, and the open infrastructure really help in enabling other people as well.
I would
So
also
anybody can
say
build
that
VPN basically. Sorry.
I would also say, kind of to your point, Grant, like I personally do envision a world where we're growing towards people having more, putting more emphasis and value on their privacy, and in a more decentralized, open source, open network, blockchain based world, I think that people will start to realize and appreciate more some of their privacy, on their online interactions and the way that they manage themselves. And so, just take myself personally, like I personally do not use a VPN regularly, but I'm starting to think about how that impacts me and like my online digital profile. And you also can make a VPN that's so much cheaper and so much more accessible and kind of knock down those barriers to entry, coupled with the fact that I think in a increasingly open source and blockchain enabled world, this will be more top of mind for people in a general sense. I do envision it being a growing market and something that we can potentially capitalize on in that sense.
So you almost view it more as a way to protect and enable data privacy.
In some senses, yes. I think that's definitely a piece of it. I mean, we've seen trillion-dollar businesses built on the backs of all of our personal online browsing data. And what's great about Web3 is it sort of flips that on its head, and it puts the power back in the people, and takes it out of the hands of the few. And I think that that's something that's really amazing about what Web3 technology is capable of. And I also think in that sense, it's making people wake up to this fact and wake up to the value of their data. And there are so many ways to monetize and get compensated for your data in a Web3 world, that I think people are going to really start taking that a lot more seriously.
And I guess to go back a bit here, Subnet 65 is the first subnet after Detail's launch. Do you think that presented you guys with any unique challenges being a subnet post Detail versus subnet pre Detail, or is it only beneficial to you guys?
Mm. No, I would say just being in the game is beneficial. Of course, like if you were there pre-DTAO and you were able to sort of have like an easier game to play, that's of course like really favorable because it really extends your runway and you can hire more people. But I do think that the new dynamics introduced by DTAO are great for the network. And you kind of also see that like with some of the older subnets like pre-DTAO sort of falling off a little bit and others kind of taking the throne again. I think that's really interesting.
And the alpha token for your subnet, will that provide essentially any utility to holders of that alpha token to use your product?
We thought about it, and I think we can. But to say exactly what it would do, I'm not sure about it yet. But we definitely think that any subnet tokenizing through TAOFU and offering the SNS to people that are invested into the SNS, we think offering some sort of utility to whatever they're providing could be really interesting. And then also like some other things that we've been thinking about is like how you have some of those crypto cards and they offer you perks to various crypto companies. We think offering like crypto perks or AI perks based on using like the TPN VPN. I think that's also like a really interesting way for us to kind of offer more utility to people that hold the SNS.
And a point Matt has brought up a couple times was the ability to create indexes. Can you give me an example of what those could look like?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Or go
yeah,
ahead,
go
Mitch.
for it, man. Go for it.
So, you know, I think when you think about the fact that BitTensor and Web3 more broadly are becoming mainstream, there's a lot more institutional capital that is finding its way into the crypto world. And those people are very different types of investors than the typical crypto degens, so to speak. They look at things from a very different risk adjusted perspective. They are much more interested in hedging risk and baskets of assets. ETFs, index funds are much, much more popular and sought after in those circles, for a variety of reasons, but mainly for the reduced utility and, kind of a hedging of risk. I think that as we see more of those people onboard into this world, we're already seeing it in Bitcoin and Ethereum with those ETFs, and more institutional capital coming on board with partners like Fidelity, BlackRock, Citadel. They're all coming, and it's only a matter of time till they find their way into BitTensor. And with SNS and index funds, I think that also presents a very unique opportunity to attract more institutional capital and give a more stable, safer, risk adjusted way to invest in a basket of subnets, a basket of SNS tokens, say 10 to 20 SNS tokens that are all focused on, maybe you're really bullish on the compute as a segment. So you want to invest in all of the compute oriented subnets, or maybe you believe that like data is the pinnacle of that and you want to invest in a basket of data focused subnets. Then we can create, and we've already talked with some partners to do this, as we onboard more subnets into SNS and tokenization through TAOFU, of creating these basketed goods, of different segments, and those can be weighted and adjusted in real time as well, and that's part of what index funds do. On top of that is they reweight things and they rebalance, based on performance to constantly keep a more diversified offering, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's also why like all the SNS will have a fixed supply of 21 million, because then you can build like really interesting primitives on top. And I think maybe to add like a little bridge to that is because of like most of the subnet investing right now is gatekept by like a few funds and individuals, VCs, etc. It's also really hard for them to actually enter and exit positions because their investment is tied to the alpha tokens. But if you basically sell the alpha tokens into a pool, you kind of destroy the subnet and its liquidity pool, and also hurting its future emissions. So then you do need like a lot of buying pressure again to basically build that back up again. So what we're enabling with these SNS is it could be really interesting for funds that are not really looking for the volatility that the alpha token pools really have themselves. They can buy into these baskets of different subnets and basically have a much more liquid representation of the subnet owner's alpha, making it also interesting for potentially bigger subnets the sort of exit, or have like their investors have a way of like exiting the sort of investment that they made, or partially, without really destroying the subnet and dumping it like into oblivion. So the index markets are kind of like just a way for people to have like basket access to different subnets, but at the same time, the SNS allow people to safely enter and exit with size without like having that play out in detail.
Are you guys exploring the idea of essentially what would be the equivalent to seed investing in traditional VC world, where you enable SNS token sales for subnets that don't even exist yet to help bootstrap registration cost?
Yeah, they're named subnet seeds, of course, like for a reason. So it's like part of what you said. It's like the early stage investing, and that could also include like subnets that don't even have a slot yet. But like with that comes a lot of responsibility. So that's why we do like a lot of research and a lot of due diligence on the teams that we want to collaborate with on this. And we've had some requests where we weren't really sure if it was the right move, but definitely like if it's the right team, part of the funds that they raise could be used to basically register a slot.
So, do you guys personally vet every team, or is this in partnership with Contango Digital Assets and Mike there? How
Well,
does the vetting process work?
yeah, so for us, like we want as much users on the platform as possible. So of course we want to work with Contango or with Yuma or like other partners currently investing like into the ecosystem in itself. So if they have like a curator already, which could be like one of those I just mentioned, that could be interesting because they've already done like a lot of the research and due diligence. But yeah, like if it's without a curator, then we would try and take that role, but basically making sure that the people investing through TAOFU are not investing into a scam, because like that's not what we want to achieve. Yeah.
So you view if they have one of these known investors already as almost like a pre-check, like a TSA pre-check in terms of
Yeah.
approvals.
Yeah, definitely.
And you guys have a formal relationship, I believe, with Contango. What is that relationship looked at? How is that defined?
So we co-incubated TPN together, and working with the guys, they're like a really good group of people with the right intent. Mike's end game sort of talk was like, I think, one of the best Bittensor talks I've ever seen. So much excitement around the network, and they're so committed to like all the teams that they work with, which I really appreciate. So like us doing TPN together led to like a start of a great partnership. And I think there's like many teams within the ecosystem like that. And that's something in crypto that I haven't seen in a long time, where there's like so much shared excitement around this common thing that we're building towards and building this digital brain. And I think Bittensor could be one of the biggest in basically attracting a lot of crypto teams outside, having them work with partners like Yuma or Contango or AI teams, and basically just building towards this sort of future of like open source AI.
And before we wrap up here, you guys have a sale potentially coming at the end of next week for the first SNS token for Subnet 65, your Subnet TPN. How can users stay up to date with, I guess, participation announcements or information on that? Where can they get more there?
On the TAOFU Twitter, TAOFU Discord, of course, for like any announcements. TPN Twitter, TPN, I think it's SN65 TPN, something like that.
Yeah, I believe it's SN65 underscore TPN, if I'm not mistaken.
And
And
then
then
one
at
last
TAOFU underscore XYZ is our main Twitter. So all announcements you'll be able to find on our main TAOFU Twitter to stay up to date.
Do you
Okay.
want to give like one more say about like the future of Bittensor, Matt? Because I feel like we missed that right now. I always love it when you talk about it.
The future of Bittensor?
Yeah, why is it so exciting?
It's such a
Good
loaded
question.
It is a great question. I love BitTensor, like with a passion. Like I when I first discovered Bitcoin in 2017, I was so hooked and I went all the way down the rabbit hole. I did nothing but study Bitcoin for weeks. I've been that was in 2017. It has been since then that I had not seen anything nearly as special that made me nearly as excited until I found BitTensor. BitTensor is so uniquely special from so many different angles. I tweeted the other day that BitTensor is eating the world. You know, taking off Mark Andreessen's software is eating the world. I believe that BitTensor is eating the world and BitTensor will eat the world. There are going to be thousands of subnets someday. This is a very unique. It's almost not even a blockchain. It is. It's almost not even Web3. Like it's not even crypto Web3. It really should be its own category. It's so unique. But it's creating a digital marketplace for any type of digital commodity, and it's really wrapped up in decentralized AI, but it doesn't even need to be something AI. You can create any competition to build or create any type of value that you want, and you are tapping into a global source of talent all over the world, where the smartest people in the world are incentivized to come compete in your arena to create the best product and best value of whatever your idea is, whether it's related to AI or not. The power of the decentralized open source incentive mechanism that BitTensor creates is more powerful than any closed source, any big tech, any Web2 company with $1 trillion, because they don't have access to the entire Earth's population of talent. Anyone can come play ball in BitTensor. If you have an internet connection and you have some sort of unique skills that make you positioned to, perform well in a certain subnet, you're welcome. You are open to play and you are incentivized to play. And that is really, really special, really, really powerful. And, the fair launch of it all, the tokenomics, the fixed supply of 21 million, very similar to Bitcoin, is part of what drew me in. But there's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be bullish on. And there are a lot of really, really, really smart people working in this ecosystem. The talent of people is unlike anything I've seen in any other blockchain. And that's not to throw shade at anywhere else. It just speaks to the level of
It's up.
people participating here.
Yeah.
it's special, and it's going to change the world. That's how I feel.
And then
And
Mitch, let me throw that question to you. Why are
yeah,
you so excited about Bittensor? Why are you here?
well, I can imagine that there's like going to be future Web2 moguls that are going to be moving into Bittensor to subsidize part of the cost that they have. Whether you look at companies like Suno or like the song generation thing, or you look at companies like Midjourney, basically moving the Bittensor to incentivize the competition amongst miners and basically just earn more money by reducing costs. I think that's amazing. And I can really imagine a future where like all subnets, the competition will be super intense. There'll be revenue generating businesses, which is like really weird in crypto. Most don't really do that, except for like the exchanges or the places that people speculate at. So that's like the future that I think that we're heading into. And because Bittensor is not as crypto-y as most other protocols, the outputs aren't really always the truth. They're like hard to validate. So it's also partially trust-based, which makes it like super interesting. In Bitcoin, like every block is a block, but in Bittensor, like an output by like an image that's generated or a song that would be generated, or just an output written in text, it's always different, and there's like a billion different outcomes, and that's like part of, I think, what makes Bittensor so successful right now is that the network effect and the momentum it's had, as long as this keeps going and the value that keeps being created continues to increase, I think this is one of the biggest sort of paradigms in distributed computing where there's like actual value being created, and like no other network in crypto does it. Nothing. And that makes me like really excited, where there's like a playground of like really smart open source AI teams playing around, or like other teams producing like other digital commodities, subsidizing their costs, being able to pay their teams and experiment. I think that's amazing. So we have a really exciting future for Bittensor. And if this doesn't go to the top 10, then I think like crypto altogether should just quit being crypto and stop.
There we go. Well, this ties in perfectly with the last question I wanted to ask you guys today. And that is, what advice do you have for teams or individuals? What is the best way people can utilize Bittensor or come into Bittensor and be successful?
Yeah, I would say try and align with like really smart people building in the ecosystem first. So basically just dive into their discords, start learning, start trying to mine. You'll find out like how hard it is to actually compete. Um, yeah, I would say being aligned with the right people and being excited, and just get involved within the ecosystem. And then over time, as you're like more intertwined, I can really imagine that if teams like what you're doing, you can probably pick a team and maybe work there at some point, if you can actually deliver some value. Yeah, that.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, I'd say the best thing you can do to start is just learn. Go read the BitTensor white paper, hop into the Discord, stay all the stuff going down in the route chat, and meet people, reach out, be friendly, put yourself out there, go to networking events, surround yourself with people that understand this better than you do. That's part of why I moved to Austin. I mean, the people in this office are so incredibly smart. They know so much about BitTensor. I consider myself a relatively intelligent person. I feel like the dumbest person in this office. Like, I feel like I know a good amount about BitTensor. I think I know the least about BitTensor of everyone here. And that is so valuable because I just learned so much from being in the same room as these people. And so, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Surround yourself with people that have done what you want to do, and those things will rub off, and help you get to where you want to be.
Matt, Mitch, great chatting with you guys today.
It's a
Thank you
pleasure.
for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for
Thank you for
having us.
having us, sir. It was a pleasure, Grant. We'll have to do it again sometime.